Good afternoon, everyone. So, without further ado, because we have limited time and a lot to discuss, I would like to introduce our panelists here. So, on my left, I have Tanja, who is the legal counsel at Acre, which forms part of a group involved in crypto asset services and blockchain technology. Before joining Acre, Tanja worked with me at WH Partners, where she provided legal and regulatory advice involving specifically gaming, blockchain, and cryptocurrencies. We have also Andreas, who is a partner at MME Partners in Switzerland, and one of the first lawyers to advise firms involved in cryptocurrencies and blockchain. He is also a member of the International Masters of Gaming Law. He was also the person that introduced me to crypto, so thank you, Andreas. We have Brendan, who occupies the role of head of legal at the MGA and has been working there for over 5 years. His main area of practice is general legal and regulatory affairs, while he also has a keen interest in matters relating to blockchain, AI, and esports. And finally, our guest of honor today is Taylor, who describes himself as a VR nerd, but he is also the co-founder of Axon Park, a virtual reality education platform, as well as a guest lecturer at Harvard University. He's also recognized as a Forbes 30 under 30. So, without further ado, I'll start by saying that Web3 gaming, in my opinion, can probably be seen as a further evolution of gamification of gambling. It attracts newer generations which are not interested in traditional gambling, and provides a platform for gamers to earn money by doing what they love. Tanja, Andreas, is this too good to be true? What are the pitfalls and challenges?
I would say that when we're talking about play-to-earn games, it's very important to differentiate between gaming and gambling, right? So these are the terms that they're very commonly mixed, right? So when we're looking into play-to-earn gaming, we have a specific user base, right? We have people who are still there for fun, but we're also seeing a shift in the psychology of gaming in a way, because they have a new element, which is the earning part, right? And for the gambling, it's slightly different, right? So the mechanics of the games are different as well. But what's also interesting is that we have a new user base, which, as you said, they're not interested in the traditional gaming or in gambling, but they're interested in the crypto aspect of the game. So there, what we will have is, if anyone is familiar with the DAOs and NFTs. So basically, these people would be entering this market for the speculatory purposes, right? So it's more about approaching it from the investment point of view. So based on that, I would say that the challenges are different as well, because you can't have one-fits-all approach towards play-to-earn games, right? If you're looking what the challenges are from the gaming point of view, I would say that these games are not as sophisticated as the traditional gaming games, and therefore it's very hard to just keep the players engaged based on the earning factor. From the gambling point of view, it's a matter of how convenient is this for them, how interesting is it for them, because I would say that the gambling part is like there's a high risk, high reward, and it's easily accessible, right?
That's a very interesting point, and I'll come to that as well later about how convenient it is.
Exactly.
Andreas, what's your take?
Yeah, well, first of all, I'm very glad to see that we're moving away from this kind of discussion, can cryptocurrencies be used as a stake in gaming? We're now moving on to kind of how blockchain technology can involve the gaming industry on the content side. So this is a good news. On the other question, I also agree that we kind of need to distinguish between gambling and gaming, and we see that this play-to-earn mechanism, the NFT issuance that relate to games, move those two topics together to some extent. And what's interesting to see, when I look back the last, well, probably 10 years that I've been discussing blockchain applications with financial market regulators, we're starting now to have the same discussions, and I'm curious to hear your voice on that, with the gaming authorities. And it's always a bit the question, when is gambling regulations, when are they being triggered? And is it as simple that if I issue an NFT and I keep the NFT, I can't lose the NFT as part of the game, that I'm outside the scope of those regulations? And I think what the financial market authorities have been doing the past 10 years, roughly, depending a bit on the jurisdictions, then they've been strongly taking the position substance over form. So they look at a new technical setup from an economic conceptual perspective, and then review whether this same logic that they apply the laws on also would apply to this economical concept. And I think this is also happening now, or should happen now, in the gambling industries. If I look around many European jurisdictions, including Switzerland, France, the UK, we have been already seen enforcement measures against NFT play-to-earn games, and which more take a very formalistic approach. And I think they need to change that to look at the overall economic model and ask the question, why would someone purchase an NFT? And does this NFT really have a value by itself? And if yes, then you're probably outside gambling regulations. However, when you only purchase to participate in the game, it likely will qualify as a stake. I think that's a decisive discussion to have over the next years.
So, Brendan, what's the approach towards this new phenomenon by the MGA? How is the MGA also looking at NFTs and play-to-earn games?
Thanks, Joe. So, as such, in relation to play-to-earn games, we are seeing operators actually exploring the sector, and we do expect elements from play-to-earn games permeating into the gambling sector. But at this point in time, our approach is essentially that of determining whether the criteria which make a game licensable are present in these types of games. These criteria being financial sacrifice on part of the player, the predominance of chance, and the price of money or money's worth. If these elements are present, then it would definitely be something that the MGA would look into. Now, when it comes to NFTs specifically, it depends. And our approach is very much in line with the recommendations made by FATF in relation to the crypto sector in this regard, in the sense that we'll view NFTs in terms of their functionality, since ultimately there are different types of NFTs and different use cases. So at this moment in time, the proposals that we've received from our operators mainly relate to NFTs being used as VIP tokens, which confer some sort of benefit to the players in the operators' ecosystem, and also NFTs being handed out as prizes. Now, in this regard, we don't preclude operators from using NFTs in such way, but ultimately we need to make sure that players are safeguarded and aren't exposed to risk as a result of operators making use of NFTs in this way. To cut a long story short, although our law wasn't drafted with these concepts specifically in mind, and we do aim to supplement it with guidance in the future, we don't preclude operators from using this technology from the outset, but ultimately we need to ensure that our own regulatory objectives wouldn't be prejudiced as a result of operators making use of this technology.
Okay. Before I pass on to Taylor, we had a very interesting discussion in our pre-panel call. And particularly Andreas, Brendan, and I were discussing what is licensable and what is not licensable. And the main ideas that were running around were, okay, so in theory, if at least under Maltese law, if there's no stake, if I don't risk any funds, it does not fall under the Maltese online gambling framework. It's not gambling. And And in most of these games that we're seeing, there is no risk of funds, because at most what there is locking an NFT in your own wallet generally, so in your non-custodial wallet. And by the fact that you have locked the NFT there, you can participate in the games, you will be given coins for free, and you'll be able to participate. And the MGA's view of this kind of activity is that it is not a licensable activity. So Andreas, you were saying, okay, interesting, because there are other authorities taking a different view out there. And yes, it is clear that most authorities are still getting their head around on whether this should be regulated or not, and if it should be regulated, under which remit it should be regulated. So I'd like an open discussion here on what your views are.
Yeah, very, very happy to start again, being aware that I did not make myself too popular on our pre-discussion of the panel. But again, I think the logic is you explained is just a bit too good to be true. If you, of course, we need to look whether we have a stake. I think most jurisdictions require some kind of form of stake and then some kind of skill or a luck element in order to qualify as a game or a regulated game. And so the question is purchasing an NFT, which is being locked, which you can't lose throughout the gaming mechanics, could that qualify as a stake or not? And I think from what I have seen from various regulators in the space, including Switzerland, where we already have a couple of enforcement measures, including France and the UK explained, they look at it from a very formalistic prospect and say, well, you purchase an NFT, the purchase of the NFT is a stake, thus if it doesn't really matter whether you can lose it or not, as long as you purchase the price, you lost the money for that. I think that is too short-sighted. I fully agree. If this NFT can be resold on the secondary market, it has a value by itself and it has a life by itself, independent of its connection to a game, I would say, no, of course, this is not a stake. This is clearly an asset, a digital asset, which people can hold, can transact, and may be used as part of a game logic, but it has a different life. So I would say this kind of NFT would not qualify as a stake, the purchase of that. However, if you would have a scenario, which in many cases it is, that people only purchase the NFT to participate in a game, where the whole economic value of that NFT relates to a game and not to anything beyond that, I think the world looks a bit different. So it's really a case, in my view, a case-by-case assessment based on an economic logic to be assessed.
Yes, and there's the argument as well that every NFT has its own value. So ultimately, from my end, one thing that we're discussing is, yes, but there might be an NFT that was just created just to participate in this game. But it's also true that it's always the case that you can take that NFT, go and market it in any way you want, and actually get money for it, or trade it for something else that has value, another cryptocurrency, for example, or another NFT. So it is very tricky to argue, okay, this NFT was created just for this game.
Yeah, I see your logic, and I agree. It is a difficult path to walk on. For me, also looking back a bit on his history of how blockchain digital assets have been regulated on a financial market regulations perspective, it is the mere transferability of the digital assets probably not sufficient to say it has a value of its own. You need to look at the overall context, which is a trickier task to do, but I think it's probably the right path. Because you need to look at the overall liquidity of the market, the way you actually could or could not sell the NFT, who's participating in that market. So I think those will be determined as deciding elements, in my view.
Okay, Brendan?
Well, I don't have much to add to what you said, Joe, since basically that's our position at this moment in time. But I don't exclude the purchase of an NFT as actually being considered as a stake. But ultimately, again, it will depend on the context in which that NFT is purchased. If, for example, the player is obliged to purchase an NFT in order to participate in the game, and that NFT can only be used within that context, then yes, potentially there can be licensing implications. But if that player purchases that NFT in a marketplace for NFTs and then uses it without being obliged to do so in order to participate in a game, and when I say use it, I'm meaning locking it in your non-custodial wallet rather than actually sacrificing that NFT, then yes, it most probably wouldn't be caught by Maltese law at that point.
Tanya, any points from your end?
I would just agree with basically all that you said, but in a sense that personally I wouldn't see NFTs as a stake, and I would agree with you in that NFT can be perceived and should be in most cases as entry ticket to the game. The fact that you can take it out, that you can sell it on the market, that it has its own artistic value again, and let's face it, NFTs so far are just used in these virtual worlds as a status symbol as well. And they have the value on its own as well. So it's not, it's not a fungible thing as well. So how can you determine the value of the stake as well? So from all of that, I don't see how we're going to go to regulating them as a stake.
Okay, so some see the entry of gaming into the metaverse and virtual reality, and I would like you, Taylor, to also explain the differences in this. But some see this as a revolution, not just an evolution, because it's the first time that in gambling we're moving from something more convenient. So usually we moved from land-based to computer, from the comfort of our home, to our laptop, to the mobile device, which we have it on us all the time. But this time it's different. This time we're going to something bulkier, less convenient. So first and foremost, my question as a VR nerd, I would like to ask you whether there's any hope inside that soon we're going to have any VR sets that are not much bigger than normal glasses. Actually, on this panel, I noticed we all have glasses, so we're used to it. How do you see this as a revolution? Why are we seeing this happening? And what are your thoughts for the future, in particular in metaverse and VR gambling?
So diving into the first part of the question, the form factor of the headsets and how they're so huge, they are incredibly huge right now. They kind of hurt your neck if you wear them for a long time. They cause eye strain. Some people get dizzy and nauseous. So why would we ever want to use these devices, right? If you look at where they've come over the past 8 years since Oculus got acquired by Facebook, which it was like a $3 billion sale out of nowhere. This tiny company just exploded VR onto the scene. If you look at the headsets back then compared to where they are now, it's significantly, significantly smaller, faster, more comfortable. And then even just a month or so ago, a new headset was announced that went from prior the standalone headsets being about 470 grams to now down to 295 grams. So that's already a very significant decrease. So as the technology gets faster, as we really refine the optics, we will see them come down in size and weight, and they'll get more comfortable. In terms of glasses like this is the holy grail. This is what everyone wants. So instead of phones, because I always think about this, like the fact that we use these tiny phones, like the generations after us will say, what were you thinking? Like interacting with all your information on this little 4-inch device, like trying to tap, looking down like this, versus having glasses where you can project 100 phones. You can project huge screens. You can project a hologram of someone talking to you. So that type of technology is a lot more difficult to create. You have to pack a lot of it into this lightweight frame. What a lot of companies, for example, like Apple, is rumored to be doing, because they're very closed about it, is leveraging the power of the phone. So the phone becomes the computer, and the glasses become the display, and also the sensors, the cameras that can understand what you're looking at, where you're moving, so that the world is positionally tracked, is what it's called. So the object, if it's sitting on the table, it actually looks like it's there no matter where you move. So it's always hard to put an exact timeline, but I'd say within the coming decades, plural, everyone will probably shift from these tiny flat screen tap devices into immersive, spatial, interactive devices that actually enable us to interact with the information in 3 dimensions, like human beings interacting in the 3-dimensional world. So yeah, I would just say just keep an eye on it, because it is getting progressively smaller, cheaper, faster, more comfortable, and just it's a matter of time.
Thanks for that insight. So we have a bit less than 5 minutes. So I'd like a general round, a question with all of you answering. What are your predictions for this sector? Do you see mainstream online gambling moving into VR and embracing NFTs, or will this be just a different product altogether for a different for a different market, basically, for a different set of consumers?
I would say that we will definitely see more games which are focused on the earning aspects in the near future, because I believe that even the crypto hype is attributing to that. But then on a medium and a longer term, we'll see games which do have all these elements, but are more focused on the gaming part. But at the same time, as I was saying, these are the 2 different industries, and I would still see them as a separate thing. I would see the evolution in online gambling moving into the VR world, but then again, we'll have to go through the obstacles of how convenient, how easily accessible it is for everyone. So, and then from the gaming aspect, once the developers focus more on the game itself and the less on the earning aspect, we'll see the progression there as well.
Okay. Andreas?
Yeah, I think I very much agree. We currently have a moment of somewhat singularity. We have, for the metaverse Web3 gaming part, we see a lot of development in technology, in vision technology, as you explained. We see major investments in this area, and we also have kind of from a social behavior, we're starting to get very much used to interact on a digital level, and we now have digital assets which can be held individually. So I strongly believe that all of us will be getting used to gaming in a metaverse scenario. And from a user perspective and mass adoption perspective, when I see how blockchain technology has been used in the mass market, it's mainly around entertainment, gaming included. So I think we're going to see a lot of metaverse-style gaming with NFT or other digital asset types in the future.
So I'm going to limit my reply from a gambling perspective in my case. Although I think that it is a bit early to tell for the time being, I think that we won't see a complete shift in the gambling industry to one which totally revolves around this technology. But that being said, I think that we will see new products being created and which can ultimately attract new customer bases. So although, yeah, I don't envisage a complete shift, I think that due to the dynamic nature of the industry, we will definitely see more uptake of the technology.
Taylor, any last words?
So I just want to touch on the actual title of this panel, which is Web3 and Play to Earn. So I think one thing, too, is the distinction between the metaverse as a concept of 3-dimensional spatial information, sort of like a 3D version of the internet. So that's the metaverse. Then Web3 is basically a decentralized internet that's built using blockchain and tokenomics and different types of new technologies, distributed technologies. So there is a difference. And then virtual reality is just like a new way of accessing that world. So they are distinct terms. And one thing, too, that I'd say specifically about Web3 is like to try to boil it down into the simplest form that I've been able to think about is basically imagine playing a game like Fortnite or Valorant or Call of Duty, like any of these big games, where you go and you're spending all this money on your skins, like mainly cosmetic things that just make your avatar look cool. So you spend all this money, and let's say you've spent hundreds of dollars. When you're done playing that game or the next version comes out, you've just lost that money. Like you've enjoyed it, and it's maybe money well spent, but it's gone. Versus in a Web3 game, you're buying these skins, you're buying emotes, you actually own those assets. So in the future, when the game changes, you go and sell it. And maybe you were first in the game, so you have a super rare skin that you can now go sell for 5 times the markup. So when you think about, like, it's a small difference, but when people start getting used to this side, where they're actually owning their assets, they have governance rights, they can vote on what happens with the game, and they can actually feel their impact, and then you ask them to go back to playing Valorant or Call of Duty or a game where they don't own the assets, predicated on the gameplay being equal, like it both being fun games, I just don't see a world in which people would want to go back to not owning their assets, not being able to have control of the platform. So it's a small shift, but now that the cat's out of the bag, I just don't see any going back.